Quality learning happens when your students see relevance in their learning, are actively engaged in their learning experience, and are able to transfer their knowledge and skills. When designing effective lessons, it is crucial to determine the lesson objectives first. Lesson objectives are what you want your students to achieve at the end of a lesson or unit of instruction, and are based on the aims of the subject syllabus. Determining lesson objectives requires you to consider what student learning outcomes you want to achieve in the lesson and how you would want to lead students to achieve the desired student learning outcomes at the end of instruction. Lesson objectives also guide you to determine the success criteria for learning.
I know what I need to learn in this lesson.
I know what the expectations of the completed task are.
The success criteria serve as a common frame of reference for the checking of understanding and for the provision of effective feedback to the students. Success criteria also help promote self-directed learning in students as they use the success criteria to monitor their own learning progress towards achieving the intended lesson objectives.
Now we know where we are and how to progress.
Well-crafted lesson objectives contribute to the learning experience of your students, which leads to quality learning. In this video, we will share 3 guidelines when determining lesson objectives in designing effective lessons. Guideline 1. Ensure alignment of the lesson objectives with the student learning outcomes. When deciding lesson objectives, consider the student learning outcomes. The knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that support the development of the 21st century competencies students will need to thrive in the world that awaits them. Familiarity with your subject's disciplinarity, which is expressed in the relevant MOE teaching and learning syllabus and teaching and learning guide, will allow you to determine the KSAV that should be achieved in your lessons. Subject disciplinarity comprises both substantive and syntactic knowledge. Substantive knowledge refers to the facts and concepts of a subject organized in structures or frameworks that shape conceptualization and reasoning. Syntactic knowledge consists of the procedures, means, and processes for discovering and accepting knowledge for a given discipline. By considering the subject's disciplinarity and the 21st century competencies, you will be able to determine lesson objectives that enable students to attain the learning outcomes that are relevant to their lives and that are transferable within the subject, across subjects, and beyond school.
The values and attitudes picked up through physical education has encouraged me to enjoy a lifetime of active, healthy living.
The knowledge and skills picked up in English language lessons can be used to write the JavaScript for the upcoming Singapore Youth Festival Arts presentation.
Guideline 2. Find out what students already know and can do before determining the lesson objectives. When determining lesson objectives, find out what your students already know and can do before determining the lesson objectives. In this way, you will have greater clarity about what needs to be taught based on your students' understanding and capabilities. It will also alert you to the potential challenges that they may encounter in the learning process.
I know that frictional force will slow the wooden block down as it moves across a flat surface.
I'm able to predict and test the effect of friction acting on the wooden block when the surface type is changed.
I'm not sure how to prove that friction affects the motion of a wooden block.
I'm not sure what friction is.
through a pre-assessment task, you will then know which students have and do not have what you have intended to introduce in the lesson. You may then choose to adjust the lesson objectives accordingly, either to build on your students' current knowledge and capabilities or to address the gaps to better engage them in the learning process. This would guide you in determining lesson objectives that build on and leverage what your students already possess, leading to learning that is relevant and engaging for your students. Guideline 3. Set out achievable and realistic lesson objectives. Lesson objectives are achievable when students have clarity about what they need to know, understand, and be able to do. This clarity can be achieved by translating the lesson objectives to success criteria.
So these are what we need to do.
For the success criteria, to help students have clarity of what they need to know, understand, and be able to do, use developmentally appropriate language and make the criteria explicit in the form of descriptors as a rubric or in any other meaningful forms relevant to the learning. When students understand where they need to go, they are engaged as they are better able to monitor their progress of learning. They are also in a better position to comprehend teacher-student and student-student feedback to progress towards the intended lesson objectives. Lesson objectives are realistic when they can be attained in a given time and with the resources available for teaching and learning. Teachers could come together to collectively draw on their combined knowledge and experience to be better informed of the lesson objectives that can be achieved within the constraints, allowing for a pace that is conducive for learning.
I realized that I couldn't cover all the lesson objectives in one lesson.
Yes, from my experience, you would need at least 2 lessons to cover the objectives.
I guess I better cut down on the number of objectives I wish to meet in this lesson then.
In conclusion, determining lesson objectives provides you with clear goals in mind, allowing you to plan and enact the instructional strategies to meet the lesson objectives. From your students' perspective, lesson objectives, when translated to success criteria, help them to know where they are and where they need to go. In conclusion, you can facilitate quality learning when you craft lesson objectives that are aligned with the student learning outcomes, that consider what your students already know and can do, and that are calibrated to be achievable and realistic. Such learning objectives, when translated to success criteria, help your students see relevance in their learning, encourage their engagement, and allow them to transfer knowledge and skills within the subject, across subjects, and beyond school.